Oh, listen to Grandpa, he's telling war stories again. Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane's voice cut through the sterile air of Fort Bragg's classified Delta Force compound like a blade. The 31-year-old operator wasn't looking at the advanced weapons systems scattered across the secure briefing room, or the mission planning boards covered in classified intel. His cold blue eyes were fixed on the elderly janitor methodically mopping floors near the restricted equipment lockers. Specifically at the way the old man was quietly recounting a tale of jungle warfare to a couple of younger, visibly amused operators during their break. The story involved a daring infiltration, enemy patrols, and a miraculous escape. The kind of exaggerated yarn Kane had heard 1,000 times from civilians trying to impress real soldiers. Harold Hank Morrison, 78 years old, paused his methodical work, a faint smile playing on his lips. His weathered hands gripped the mop handle with the deliberate efficiency of someone who had been maintaining classified facilities for decades. He wore his usual faded red work shirt that had survived more wash cycles than most soldiers had deployments, blue jeans with permanent chemical stains from industrial cleaning supplies, and worn work boots that had walked through more classified facilities than most generals would ever see. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, and his pale blue eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had spent a lifetime observing details that others missed entirely. Kane was Delta Force, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, the absolute pinnacle of military excellence. His unit didn't officially exist, their missions were classified beyond most generals' clearance levels, and their selection process was so demanding that Navy SEALs washed out regularly. The idea that some elderly civilian janitor could move so calmly through their most secure spaces, seemingly oblivious to the weight of classified operations surrounding him, and then spin fantastical war stories to his operators, graded against every security instinct Kane had developed, was disrespectful to the real sacrifices made by actual warriors. "Seriously, old man," Kane continued, his voice carrying casual authority mixed with open contempt, "you telling these guys about your heroic mop-handle charges in the great cleaning wars of '87? Give it a rest, Grandpa. These guys are Tier 1, they've seen actual combat." Several other operators looked up from their equipment maintenance. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez cleaning his suppressed M4, Sergeant First Class Chen checking night vision systems, and Sergeant Williams organizing breaching charges. They all shared Kane's dismissive attitude toward the janitor's embellished tales. Morrison slowly turned, setting his mop against the wall with deliberate care. His gaze swept over the young, hardened faces of the Delta operators, taking in their expensive tactical gear, state-of-the-art weapons, and the confident bearing that came with being the best. "Just sharing a bit of history, son." Morrison's voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried an undertone that made Rodriguez pause his weapon maintenance. A story about how even the best-laid plans can go sideways, and sometimes the quietest approach is the most effective. Kane's expression hardened with mounting irritation. "History? The only history you've got is with that mop bucket. You want to tell war stories? Go join a VFW. This is Delta Force. We don't have time for fairy tales. What was your unit, your call sign?" Morrison's pale blue eyes locked onto Kane's with an intensity that made the young operator involuntarily step back. "My call sign," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying decades of authority, "was Ghost 6. The air in the compound seemed to crystallize. "Ghost 6! Kane's voice dropped to barely a whisper, all mockery instantly drained from it. The other Delta operators, who had been chuckling moments before, now stood in stunned silence, their faces pale. "Ghost 6! Wasn't just any call sign. It was the legendary, almost mythical designation for the team leader of the most covert, most effective deep reconnaissance unit that operated behind enemy lines during the Vietnam War. It was a name whispered in hushed tones among Special Operations Forces, a symbol of unparalleled stealth, survival, and mission success against impossible odds. "Bullshit!" Kane finally managed, but his voice lacked conviction, tinged with a dawning horror. "Ghost 6 was MACVSOG, a myth. You're a janitor." Morrison simply held Kane's gaze, his weathered features conveying a lifetime of experiences that dwarfed anything the young operator could imagine. "Son, myths often have their roots in reality, My last active duty assignment was with MACVSOG Recon Team Idaho. My call sign was Ghost 6. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Every operator in the compound, men hardened by years of combat and the most rigorous training imaginable, froze completely. This humble janitor, this elderly man they had been casually dismissing for months, had been the legendary Ghost 6, the very embodiment of the silent warrior ethos that defined their professional existence and personal identity. Morrison's mind drifted to another time, another place entirely. The Fort Bragg compound faded away, replaced by the suffocating humidity and constant danger of the Laotian jungle. He wasn't 78 anymore. He was 25. A staff sergeant with MACVSOG, leading Recon Team Idaho on a critical intelligence gathering mission deep inside enemy territory. The year was 1971, and Morrison, then known as Ghost 6, was scanning the triple canopy jungle, every sense alert for signs of enemy patrols. In that harsh landscape, Morrison had earned a reputation as a leader who could move through enemy territory undetected for weeks, gathering intelligence that saved thousands of American lives. He had spent years in special forces, enduring the brutal selection process for SOG's reconnaissance teams. As Ghost 6, he was the living embodiment of the unit's ethos. Silent, professional, deadly effective, and utterly untraceable by the enemy. He remembered the crushing weight of responsibility, the constant pressure to make decisions that would bring his operators home alive while accomplishing missions that could never be publicly acknowledged. His war stories weren't tales. They were grim, unvarnished recollections of harrowing missions. Back in the present, Morrison's eyes refocused on the young Delta operators surrounding him. "The thing about war stories," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying the calm authority that had once commanded respect from thousands, "is that they often contain lessons that no training manual can teach. Lessons about survival, about patience, and about the true cost of war." Kane's face, usually a mask of steely determination, was now pale with shock and dawning realization. He had spent the last several minutes mocking a man whose legendary status within their own unit was whispered about in reverent tones among the most senior special operations commanders. He had challenged the very foundation of Delta Force values, respect for proven experience and battlefield leadership. Morrison slowly picked up his mop, his movements now imbued with an almost ceremonial dignity that commanded absolute attention from every operator in the room. "You boys are good," he said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly across the silent compound. "Best in the world, no doubt about it. But remember, the enemy changes, the gear evolves, but the fundamentals of what makes an effective operator never change. Discipline, humility, and absolute respect for those who came before you, especially those who paid the highest price." The room remained in absolute, stunned silence, every operator processing the impossible revelation. Staff Sergeant Chen, usually a picture of stoicism, looked genuinely shaken. "Sir," Chen said, his voice barely above a whisper, using the respectful address that a legendary figure like Ghost 6 demanded, "what if I contact headquarters just to verify your service record and ensure you're receiving proper recognition?" Morrison's expression showed mild concern mixed with understanding. "Son, that's not necessary. I'm perfectly content with my current role and don't require any special treatment or acknowledgement. My service speaks for itself, and my peace is in the quiet." Chen was already reaching for his secure communications device, realizing that someone of Morrison's legendary status deserved immediate attention from current leadership. "Sergeant Major, this is Chen at the compound," he said when Williams answered on the first ring. "We have a situation requiring immediate clarification. Our facility janitor has just identified himself as the legendary Ghost 6, former MACVSOG Recon Team Idaho." There was an unusually long pause on the secure line that made Chen increasingly uncomfortable. When Sergeant Major Williams finally spoke again, his voice carried tension Chen had never heard before, not in 8 years of knowing him. "Chen, did you say Ghost 6, as in Harold Morrison, MACVSOG?" The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity as Chen waited for guidance. "Sweet Mother of God," Williams said, papers rustling frantically in the background, the sound of someone searching desperately through classified historical files. "Chen, listen to me very carefully and do exactly what I tell you. Do not allow anyone to lay a single hand on Harold Morrison. Do you understand me completely? Not a finger on that man, and treat him with the highest respect possible. I'm making several urgent phone calls immediately. That man is definitely not a confused civilian contractor. Keep the entire situation completely calm and respectful until I can get there personally with higher authority." Morrison had quietly moved to examine the mission planning board, studying operational schematics with the methodical attention of someone who had once written the book on deep reconnaissance. "Your primary insertion point has a potential thermal signature issue here," he observed, tapping a location with a calloused finger. "The sun angle at pre-dawn will create a distinct shadow that's easily observable from that ridge. You'll need to adjust your approach or use a different insertion method to avoid early detection." The technical accuracy of his tactical assessment made several operators pause their preparations and look at the planning board with new understanding. Before anyone could respond, they heard multiple vehicles approaching at high speed across the base. Heavy engines pushed to their limits, creating massive dust clouds visible through the compound's security windows. Morrison remained exactly where he had been throughout the entire confrontation, patient, methodical, still conducting his assessment as if the developing crisis was exactly what he had anticipated. The convoy screeched to a halt outside the facility with the urgency of a national security response. Heavy doors slammed simultaneously, and the sound of military boots on concrete echoed through the building's corridors with unmistakable purpose and authority. Kane stood frozen as senior personnel emerged from vehicles with the kind of urgency that made his stomach drop completely. Sergeant Major Williams stepped out quickly from the lead vehicle, followed by several senior officers Kane didn't recognize, but whose bearing suggested extraordinary authority and clearance levels. But everyone's attention immediately focused on the second vehicle, where a two-star lieutenant general was climbing out with an expression that mixed profound respect with barely controlled urgency about the developing situation. Lieutenant General Patricia Hayes commanded Joint Special Operations Command, overseeing all Tier 1 units including Delta Force and other classified special operations elements. The unexpected personal arrival at what should have been a routine facility issue was unprecedented, causing every operator present to snap to rigid attention. General Hayes walked directly toward Morrison, completely ignoring Kane and the other operators as if they were invisible obstacles to her primary mission. When General Hayes reached Morrison's position near the mission planning board, something remarkable happened that would be burned into every operator's memory. The general came to rigid attention and rendered the sharpest, most precise salute that anyone present had ever witnessed in their entire military career. Command Sergeant Major Harold Morrison, United States Army Special Forces, retired. General Hayes said, her voice booming across the suddenly silent facility with authority that made every person present freeze in place. "Sir, on behalf of the United States Army and Joint Special Operations Command, I apologize for the years you have served without proper recognition of your extraordinary contributions to our nation's security." Morrison slowly returned the salute from his position near the classified planning materials, movements still precise despite his age and decades of retirement from active duty. "General, no apology necessary. These operators were protecting their facility and operational security exactly as trained. The assessment is proceeding as planned and yielding valuable data." The general held her salute for 5 full seconds before dropping her hand with military precision that spoke of deep personal respect and professional admiration. Kane felt his knees go weak as reality crashed over him like a cold wave. He had been questioning someone whose rank represented the pinnacle of enlisted leadership, someone whose experience and authority exceeded anything he had encountered in his military career. General Hayes turned to address the stunned operators who had gathered to witness this unprecedented scene unfolding before them. "Gentlemen, allow me to properly introduce Command Sergeant Major Harold, Ghost 6, Morrison, former senior enlisted leader of your own unit and the most decorated NCO in Special Operations history. Command Sergeant Major Morrison is a recipient of the Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, and 4 Purple Hearts earned during operations that officially never happened with MACVSOG Recon Team Idaho. The facility remained frozen in absolute silence as the full implications sank in completely. They had been casually interacting for months with a living legend whose service record represented the absolute pinnacle of military excellence, courage, and sacrifice. General Hayes continued, her voice filled with profound respect and admiration. Command Sergeant Major Morrison's leadership during classified operations in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia saved countless American lives and protected missions that remain classified at levels above your current clearance. His tactical innovations in deep reconnaissance and leadership under fire are still taught in every Special Operations qualification course across all service branches. Morrison shifted uncomfortably near his cleaning equipment, clearly uncomfortable with public recognition that violated decades of operational security habits and training. "General," Morrison said with the dignified humility that had characterized his entire military career, "these young operators are carrying on the same traditions and values we established decades ago. They deserve recognition for their current service, not an old soldier who found peace in honest work." General Hayes reached into her briefcase and withdrew a small wooden presentation box along with an official document bearing multiple high-level signatures. "Command Sergeant Major Morrison, this is your official recall to active duty as Senior Enlisted Advisor to Joint Special Operations Command. Your experience, wisdom, and ability to mentor the next generation of operators are needed now more than ever." Morrison looked down at the orders with emotions playing across his weathered features, decades of memories flooding back. "General, I'm deeply honored by the offer, but I'm 78 years old. My days of active operations are long behind me." General Hayes smiled with understanding. "Sir, we're not asking you to conduct direct action missions or jump out of aircraft. We need your knowledge, your experience in training young operators, and your ability to teach what it truly means to be a Special Forces soldier." Morrison slowly rolled up his sleeve, revealing a faded tattoo of the Special Forces arrowhead and dagger, barely visible due to age and decades of sun exposure. General Hayes smiled knowingly and began rolling up her own sleeve, revealing a newer version of the same insignia, crisp and clear. "This insignia, operators," the general said, displaying both tattoos side by side, "represents membership in a brotherhood that transcends rank, age, and current duty status. It connects every generation of Special Operations warriors." Staff Sergeant Kane stepped forward, his voice filled with newfound respect and genuine humility. "Command Sergeant Major Morrison, I was completely out of line questioning your presence and mocking your war stories. I apologize for my disrespect and failure to recognize your service and sacrifice to our unit and our nation." Morrison gave him a genuine smile that held no trace of resentment or anger. "Son, you were doing your job exactly as trained. You protected your facility and your operators. Your security response will be highlighted as exemplary in my final report, and your skepticism is a valuable trait for an operator." General Hayes carefully pinned Morrison's new consultant badge to his faded red work shirt, the official identification looking oddly appropriate against the humble fabric. As Morrison prepared to consider his new role as Senior Enlisted Advisor, Kane finally understood that the most valuable oversight often appeared in the humblest form.